So let's talk to Negar Mortazavi, Senior Fellow at the Centre for International Policy. Negar, we've seen huge protests across Iran before, of course, following the death in police custody of Mahsa Amini. But when we talk to commentators, they say that these feel different. Why? Do they really feel different?
Well, first of all, as your report indicated, it's hard to paint a very accurate picture because of this lack of communication or just a very trickle of information. But nevertheless, when we speak to people on the ground, eyewitnesses, and also observing from the outside, they do feel different, I think, for a variety of different reasons. One is that these protests come piling up on past protests. And so the anger is even more. The grievances have not been addressed. Every time you see a round of protests, people go home, the grievance doesn't get addressed. The next time they come out, angrier. So it's definitely angrier. Sort of that feeling is more than before. It's also coming post a real war, an actual military threat on Iran in June from Israel and the United States when the regime got engaged in this foreign threat. So I think there's sort of a confidence within the protesters that this is a regime that has been weakened. Another factor, I think, was that initially they didn't use the iron fist approach as they have done with past protests and the crackdown. And that sort of opened the space a little more for people to feel safer and confident and for the crowds to grow. And now we see that iron fist starting to come down a little more delayed. And I think all of these combined have sort of created a different feeling of these protests, and they're growing like wildfire, spreading to many cities and towns across the country and really reenacting similar feelings to 2022, the Massa movement, or 2019, when there were mass protests across the country as well.
But the Massa movement then subsided and the regime remained. And yes, economically somewhat weakened. And of course, following, as you were saying, that attack from the United States. But there isn't really any logistical opposition on the ground. People are talking about the exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi, who has been speaking since these protests began. But is he really a credible opposition leader, given his background?
There isn't really an opposition movement, organized opposition movement. When we talk about a revolution, this is tending to remind people of the 1979. That actually was a very organized, years-long opposition movement with many, many deep roots in different sectors of the society, the bazaar, the universities, the leftist movements, intellectual movements, and then, of course, the more conservative and religious demographics. This is not like that. This is more scattered protests of very angry people, some of whom do chant for Reza Pahlavi and return of the monarchy, but we don't really see sort of a movement on the ground with leadership. So I don't think, minus any foreign intervention, so unless there is an external factor, Israel or the US intervening, I don't think the movement on the ground is strong enough or organized enough to really translate this into a revolutionary change and sort of bring it to the next level, yet at least.
Well, on that note, the US President Donald Trump is saying that if the authorities kill people, they will get involved, but he doesn't see this as US troops on the ground. You mentioned Israel there. Is that the way that they not attack Iran, but is that the way they get to Iran, by penalizing them, by getting Israel to do it?
Possibly. I don't think Israel will or wants or can do this alone without a green light by the U.S. We think Prime Minister Netanyahu was here in the U.S. last week to try to get that green light from President Trump. And then instead we saw the U.S. go for Venezuela. There's also limited bandwidth because the U.S. is still engaged in Venezuela. And also we know that President Trump and the American people don't have the appetite for getting involved in another endless Middle East war. That's the code word when he says no boots on the ground. But this could also be, for example, a Libya model. You have aerial bombardments of regime strongholds or centers. I don't know how exactly that may help or hurt the protesters. It may actually increase the state violence on the ground because now they have an external threat that they have to deal with. So there are a lot of unknowns, but I would say the U.S. decision, the decision in the White House, is sort of what everything else will depend on, whether they act or even the inaction of this administration.
Okay, well, Negar Mortazavi from the Centre for International Policy will continue to follow this. Thank you so much for your expertise.